Welcome to United and Independent. Our goal on this show is crystal clear: to educate, motivate, and unite. We're going to show you the incredible position and power you hold right now and what you can achieve by standing together. We're not just talking politics, we're making a difference. This is United and Independent. And now your host, Richard C. Ginnity.
Thank you, Keith. Today's show, we are going to talk about three main sections of our podcast. One called the main topic, and 2 and 3 are what we call digressions. Okay, that's where I get to sort of freelance, not exactly freelance, but talk about topics that aren't necessarily related to the main topic. But so we're going to have 3, and the first one is the main topic. Last time I said we'll talk about how that political ticket, that independent political ticket, might function once they get elected. We're going to change that because of an article that came up just 2 days ago. That article was in the Wall Street Journal, and in that article they were describing what is going on in Nikki Haley's campaign, and they introduced that 40% of New Hampshire is political independent, which amazes me, because if you say there's only 60% left, well, 60% split by Republicans and Democrats would be 30-30 each. Well, then I said, wait a second. That's our time to jump in and talk about the statement they made in that article about what the current status of the political independents are. And in that article, they revealed, I'm going to say, there's been a change, a good change, in the percentage of the voting public is now voting as a political independent. Digression 1, as I said, there's really 2 digressions this time. One is we continue the talk about AI, which we began last time. And there's an article in the Wall Street Journal that I think will really help everybody here understand AI. So we'll talk about that. Discussion number 2 is about, I'm going to say, an intrigue that sort of is developing regarding the presidential election in Ukraine. Now, that's not probably going to happen in March as when it's supposed to. It's going to happen later. But the article is about the likely, possible, should-be candidate that would oppose him. And in that article, they had something that I think, in my mind, is intriguing. So let's go to our main topic. I don't know if you recall, but last time we were on this segment of the program, the segment where we were discussing how a joint ticket, how a hypothetical ticket would work. We left off saying we would talk about how it would operate after its election, after it's won the ticket. I intended to do it this time. I still intend to do it, but I had an article come up in the Wall Street Journal for the Sunday of yesterday, January 20th and 21st, that I thought we should bring it to you because it's interesting from the standpoint, well, it's interesting in multiple places, but it's interesting from the standpoint of where our political independents really stand in the nation. There's been a substantial change that was indicated in this article. Okay, so I'm going to address or try to use as the basis for tonight two articles that I thought spoke a lot of truths about where we stand as political independents and also a clarification of where Trump stands. Okay? All right, first one, the title of the article was New Hampshire Independents Are Haley's Last-Ditch Hope. Well, already, I'm saying it, we're starting to be recognized as a change maker. And that's what we've been saying. But it goes a little deeper than that. Okay, first of all, I've got several points, asterisk, if you will. I'll have to look at them on occasion. I apologize. First of all, says 4 in 10 New Hampshire residents indicate that they are political independents. Wow, 4 out of 10, 40%. That leaves 60 for the other two. I suspect that no other group, the Democrats or Republicans, top that 40%. I'm guessing, but it would be hard pressed to see that they're 2-1 Democrats or 2-1 Republicans. Okay, and Gallup, and they refer to Gallup, which is, I think, a legitimate polling company, has suggested, and this is a key one, has suggested that 43% of the U.S. registered voters have registered as political independents. Now, in the prior forecast or prior podcast, I had gone with data that I had that says 36%. Okay, so if that number is really true, 43, and I'm saying I'd like to have somebody else check that, that's 7-point increase in what amounts to is less than a half a year. Now, that seems impossible, but let's just go with it for a second. Immediately, that 7% had to come from one of the other two. Or it could have come from some of the minors, but I don't think even the minors will total up to 7%. So just think in the terms of the Democrats were at 34, Republicans were at 29. Now, I don't think all those percentages came from one of those. At least I don't think so. So even if we just split it and say, well, 4 came from Democrats and 3 from the Republicans, that means the Democrats go from 36 to 32, and the Republicans go from 29 to 26, and we are sitting at 43. Now, I would suggest that we are what I'd call a tipping point if those percentages remain true. And a tipping point is when you can think of a war, a turning point in a war, a certain battle, a certain win, all of a sudden shifted one of the countries to win once we had that battle. There was a turning point in the Civil War. There's a turning point it looks at in World War II. There's probably a turning point on both the Pacific side and the European side. So if you can think of it in that concept, I think you'll understand why I think this is a tipping point. Okay. So that's when all of a sudden we, in political independence, are really coming up and going to be noticed that, hell, they are the kingmaker. Now, right now, they kind of just, I say kind of not ignore it. Not totally, but they aren't, do you see lots of polls saying, what are the political independents counting or thinking today, this week, this day? They're not. And that's okay, because they will be. Okay? And they will be really bothered if they get in the sense of that they're united, that they're not just people who think Democratic political independence. They're going to think, and Republican independence, because they count on that. They see that as the facts of life. But if we switch that, if we flop that and say, oh my God, half, 3/4, whatever percent of the Democratic-leaning independents and the same percentage of the Republican leaning are forging a compromise, if you will, ticket toward the center. Okay? I think that's the tipping point for all of us. So I thought it was important to bring this up. It is a great article. It talks about Nikki and and what she's doing and what the consequences are in there. And I think it's worthwhile listening to. Okay. So next, I'm going to bring up an article. This was in the editorial or opinions section of the Wall Street Journal, because what I have personally against Trump, one of probably the key points that I take is the current tendency of both Biden and Trump, proven by their historical actions, that they are not concerned about running a financially stable 4 years. Both of them are absolutely guilty of running multi-trillion-dollar deficits during their time frame. So I don't see how anybody can argue that they are good fiscal managers of our debt and of our nation. And in fact, this article talks about Trump in that area. And Trump says, oh gosh, I'm going to be good because I'm going to, and this is, I'll read that because it's important. Trump replayed a golden oldie of a campaign pledge. We're also going to pay off the national debt. It's about time. And then you look at the history. He said the same thing in 2016 before he added $8 trillion, so-called, to the tab. Now they said, okay, about half of that you can attribute to the problem of COVID. I don't like to say that, give him that much room, but this is what the article gives him, so let's give it to him. That's still $4 trillion that he added. $4 trillion. Get that in your mind. And when they say, okay, so what? Well, remember all the promises both of them made about how they're going to make massive improvements in the economy? Okay. Well, frankly, if I have your credit card or the nation's credit card, that's the easiest thing in the whole world to do. Just envision that I have your credit card at a bar. And Richard said, I think I'll buy a drink for the house. And everybody said, whoa, Richard, great, you're a bunch of money. Except that I'm using your credit card. And you're saying, what? I have to repay that? But he just looks like, wow, I hope you come back, Richard. You're really excited. I'll be back next week and I'll do it again. I'll buy another round next week. And Richard's promoting that he's a hell of a guy. And you're thinking, on my credit card? Okay? So use that as an example why anybody that's listening to this could be a hell of a generator of the economy if they have the credit card of the nation and are spending it. Especially when they use, how did they get to spend it? You'd say, well, they had to be okayed by Congress. No, there's something about there that the executive orders that can come right from the president have no requirement to be passed by either of the House that generates cash outlays. Massive. You would look back, and we'll do this maybe later on, of how many executive orders both of those candidates issued. And they're only good until they're out of office, by the way. Trump issued some. Biden came in and closed them down. If Trump wins again, he'll close down some of the Biden ones. And they're a 4-year, you say, law. But they're not law. They're executive orders. So it is important for you to know about this tendency. And there's nothing easier about getting reelected than if you put people back to work and increase your wages. And if he puts you back to work, and he puts you back to work in government functions, he can put you back in work in higher wages, because he'll just make sure that you're categorized in a higher wage category. So I just want you to emphasize that and not forget it. So there's so many people that says, well, I'm voting for Biden because he's increased wages and he's put a lot of people back to work. And Trump will say, well, I'll put more back to work. Hell, I can put twice what Biden did. Now, he's not saying that yet, but he's hinting at it. Okay? And so that's really important for you to keep in mind. Okay? And either you say, well, I don't care about that. And then the next motion that comes up, that has come up, is the Democrats cannot understand why all their good economic news isn't being appreciated by the voting. Why the voters are saying, about the economy, I'm not so sure. It's not quite, not really, I don't think the economy's that strong. And he said, look, we've got record employment. We've got low unemployment. Wages are up. Why in the heck aren't you appreciating us? And there's a reason. There's an absolute, for sure reason. Because what the young people do and their adults and grandparents are doing is saying, when I was his age, I wasn't earning what he earned or she earned, but I could buy a house with the help of my husband or with the help of my wife, and I could buy a car, and we were able to take some vacations, not wrapping around the world, but going to a national park, spend a week, and come back and not feel I can't do this. And I didn't have a massive credit card debt, and I did it, the wages back there. And yet my son, my daughter, who are, 28, 30, early 30s, don't feel like they can afford a child, have no reason to believe they'll be in a house, haven't been in a house, are even now tight on paying rent. The reason is the dollars are inflated. And so their perception of well-being is substantially below the perception that the Democrats and traditional, I'm going to say, consultants to presidents think. If you go into the election when there's high wages and low unemployment, you can't lose. I mean, you're hard-pressed to lose. And now we have a difference. We have a difference between high wages. Yeah, the wages are up. Unemployment is down. But the realities of how far that stretches, and does this buy what my mother and father had? And the answer is no. And it isn't going to be close. So everybody who is, let's say, age 35 down, are really having struggle with that feeling they're really not as well off as their parents. And yet they dwarf them in actual wage totals. I mean, gee, I'm making 3 times what my father made, but not 3 times in the buying. So it is really important for you to keep focused on both of their promises and find out, do we have 2 people on the wrong side of that issue? And I think the answer is yes. And that's why, if you will, an independent candidate or candidates in our station, the 2 tickets, are absolutely adamant that they may not necessarily balance the budget, okay? And we can talk about whether that's a good or bad thing. But they are absolutely focused on controlling the spending so we are not $2 trillion more in debt when they get through. So, and that's that I wanted to get to and tell you about before we return to the topic I said we were going to say.
This is United and Independent. And now, back to your host, Richard C. Ginnity.
Last week, as you recall, we were discussing this book, The Coming Wave, and I was concerned about some of the things in it, and I still am concerned. But I'm going to interrupt that discussion, and we'll come back to it probably next week, because there was a what they call a journal report in the Wall Street Journal today, which absolutely blew my mind as to what they were giving you about the topic of AI. They had this report, and I'll show it up, and it's called Artificial Intelligence. It's a journal report, and it's 12 pages. And I think it starts with R1 to R12. And one other thing I'm going to refer to today is what Wikipedia says about artificial intelligence, and specifically something is called generative AI, because that comes up real early, and it's very easy to say, what the heck is that? Because it's not simply AI, it's a adjective right before AI, and that's current, and that's what's taking place now and being developed now. So let's go there. I've showed you, I think, the article, or at least the first head page of it, and it says, readers have a lot of questions about AI. We answer them. That's a broad statement, but they do a pretty damn good job of doing exactly that. And so I just encourage you, because we're not going to be able to review all of this, I encourage you to get that article. And they have a service that you can access online, which will get you a complete copy of this. So we'll try to put how to do that in our website. So look for it there, or if you already know, fine, but look for it there and get that copy. I just think it's something you can share and think you really are going to be sort of looked as a, wow, you know a lot about AI. And that's going to give you, and more importantly, I think you're going to feel somewhat secure by knowing what AI has proven to be capable of now, what it not capable now, because you have to say that, because I'm going to tell you in 3 months, some of these not now could be wiped out. It's developing that quickly. So, but let's start with what you can find out about now. Okay. So, first page, if you will, they talk about talking to you guys, me guy, the ordinary people. And they asked him, what questions do you have about AI? And then they try to answer them, okay? And so, and they actually asked them to review and actually had AI create a story, a description, and they asked about a specific character or situation and let AI respond. They then analyzed AI's response to find out what was true and what was not so good. Okay, so they have 8 points, 4 plus, 4 negative, and I can't review all of them, okay? But I think you'd like to hear at least the names of those 8. So that's what I'm going to read off now. And it comes on page 2 if you want to. And let me fold it over so I get the right things. So before I even get there, they said that they did a good job. They actually took this test to 2 AIs. And the answer, I said, why did they go to 2? And they said, because there actually is a little difference. And that's key to remember. Not every AI you hear is from a single source, a single version of AI. Okay? It's in fact, the truth is you probably should shop it around and see AI that you think is complete and gives you the best, not the best answer because that's sort of qualitative, but the truthful answer that you can use. That is something I wasn't totally aware of, certainly before reading that book, and really they're clarifying it. They tested by doing that because they knew there was a problem. Okay, so they said it works very good, AI strengths, in structure and logic. Well, that's what a computer is logic. So that didn't surprise me. Filling in some details about this project, they filled it in. But they didn't say all, okay? They said some details. So they said, some details are left out. That isn't what I would perceive AI could even come up with. You're supposed to know everything, okay? And then 3, credibility. And they say up to a point. Wow, that's important for you to know, that AI may be credible, but only up to a point. They explain that what they mean by up to a point. So I think that's a good read. Well run. 4th, they said highlighting key elements. And they said it was good at that. Okay, great. Now they get over it. AI is not so good. Okay? Or less than good in their mind. Okay, the first one was lack of detail and analysis. That surprised me too. I thought that's exactly what it gave, was analyzing everything that was ever written about that topic, summarizing it in some fashion, and giving it to you. But apparently, there's some holes. You want to know that. So if you get AI to research a topic that you're about to write and ask AI to write it, you may have an ugly surprise when you hand that teacher thinking, hey, I got this one, baby. I got an A on this one. What do you mean? I left something out. Oh, AI, no, I left it out. So anyway, you understand. All right. Second problem they have is repetition. So do I have that problem, come to think of it. But anyway, the point is that it apparently repeats a lot of what it says multiple times. It gets very irritating. And you say, what? Come on, you said that before. So, okay, that was it. And perhaps the biggest word they used, this is crazy, it shook me, is occasionally it hallucinates. What? AI hallucinates? Facts that are made up and, well, are not always factual. I'm shaking my head. That's what it's supposed to be. And so they say it's that. Now, they tested 2 different versions, and I assume that statement is about both. I mean, they don't say, oh, it's only from AI from this company or the AI from that company. 2. That's mind-blowing to me, okay? And the fourth one, which I think would be understood, is a lack of personality. Okay, well, it's a machine, okay? It's not like me or my good buddy who's filming this, okay, we'll cut out the kidding. That was one article, okay? Well worth getting the whole damn thing just in that one article. But it goes on. It goes on to that, what I talked about earlier, is they put out questions to you and I about what questions would you ask AI that would perhaps come up. And so we're going to go there. I haven't got time to read all the questions. Okay, there are a lot of questions. And so I'm going to just mention a couple of questions, type of questions they've asked, and if I have time, read the answer that they gave. All the answers are less than 500 words or so. So it's not like you have to read page after page about the answers. Okay. Answer. What about these chatbox AI systems? What is that? That's this vocabulary in there that said, have you ever heard of chatbox? Some of you may have very well. Younger probably, absolutely. But when you're my age, which is hardly 2% of the population at this point, but for those over 50 and aren't a techie at all, then what the hell is a chat box? That's the word. That's the question. A good beginning question. They answer it. Okay. Then the question: how can these AIs answer almost any type of question? They talk about it, and you already know. Yeah, they can answer it, but not necessarily correctly, or without going into a hallucination, which is just a great word as far as I'm. And then they actually, what about hallucinations? When an AI makes something up but presents it as fact, they want to know. You want to know. They talk about it. So these are just a bunch of questions. I mean, it goes on like multiple. Last question I'll read. I've heard a lot about doomsday speculation about AI, but what are some of the ways it is doing good? Okay? What are other measures should be considered to help us discern the quality of the information the AI produces? Would some type of rating system work? Okay, all questions that I think would be common if we were at a conference and 30 people were sitting in the audience, they would bring. And it's there right here. And this whole group of articles, and there's so much more in this thing, is something that I really think, if you have any desire to come up to speed, to be able to judge and respond to perhaps introduction of an AI application to teach your children, those are really key things. And you should be aware of, at this point, and I can't emphasize that enough, 3 months ago, some of these questions may be handled. But it's such a fast-moving topic that almost you want to keep up every 2 or 3 months. I mean, you've got things to do, but in 3 months, half of these objections, half of these problems may have gone away. And maybe they haven't. And that last one is the one that bothers me. Maybe those are permanent. So I encourage you to get this article. I told you in my my website, there is a link there to Wall Street Journal. You can follow the link. It's free. You'll get a version free. And so I encourage you to do it. All right. Thank you very much. Now let's go on to digression number 2. I'm glad you joined us for now a second digression. And I thought we should create a second digression because of the importance of what I read this morning. And in this case, it's from BNE Intellinews, and it says their lead is former Ukrainian presidential advisor Oleksiy Arestovich flees into exile to challenge Zelensky for presidency. I think, well, that's sort of interesting, but really what's interesting is who he was and why he fled and what he's doing. Okay. So, Oleksy is a former presidential advisor to the Ukrainian president, but he's apparently fallen out of favor, fled the country, and intends to run against the president in the next election. Okay. And I said, I'm not too excited about that, but then we read further, and I kind of get excited because I think it's a second way of looking at this conflict. I'm not so sure it's what should be the primary, but I think it's interesting enough to hear about it. Ukrainian politics has grown, it's said, wider since Oleksy got involved, and he's one of the best-known figures in the Ukrainian Zelensky's administration and, frankly, to the nation. All right. He headed, at one point, Zelensky's Servant of the People Rada faction, which I think is just a political subfaction. But he gave a controversial interview, and this is what started to get him in trouble, where he sharply criticized Zelensky's war strategy and the way he was running the country. So then all of a sudden this is upgrading what he's really all about. He also, historically, was the leader on the peace talks delegation in Istanbul in March of 2022, and has stated that there was actually an agreement in that peace talks, and that President Putin was on board, was likely to sign it. Now, neither of the presidents were available or at that thing, but both of those meant to be bringing back something to sign for both of them to sign. So that obviously, and they have thought that they actually had got it. They actually had a party celebrating it. So he returned to Zelensky to get it signed. And on the day before the decision to sign it, a massive and bloody and horrible massacre happened in one of the Ukraine cities called Baka. And as a result of that violence and destruction and wholesale murder, Zelensky wouldn't sign it. He said, nope, it's over, goodbye. And I think that, frankly, I understand that. Okay, so that doesn't disturb me at all. But this fellow has continued the thought that really we should re-explore it. And he said, okay, fine. Why? Well, he said he thinks realistically we've got a stalemate. And he supports that by saying there was a general, Zaluzhny, had a controversial interview in this December, and it was put on all the papers, that he thought that the war was a stalemate. Okay? Well, that's what he believes has been covered up by too much flowery descriptions by the PR people in the current administration. And there's a lot of talk right here in the papers about that it's really a stalemate. I don't necessarily agree with that, because I think the Ukrainians are making progress technologically, and frankly, because of their initiative, they're coming down with a technological advantage over the Russians. And maybe more importantly, Zelensky has said that by the end of this year, they should be in production for their own ammunition, their own machinery, their own capability to continue this war. And I believe them, frankly. I believe they're that good, that Ukrainians are that are smart, believing this war, if you will, believing in the desire to be independent, and are going to be there. And the press isn't backing that up that I have heard, other than the one statement he made, which said that. So, but let's go on. So, Zelensky, he makes the point, Zelensky has been, very positive in his speech every night. The press is positive. You're not hearing much controversy being published. He suggested that that's bad, that's a cover-up, that there is elements of Zelensky or his group getting too much power, getting somewhat like Putin. And maybe he's got a point there, okay? But recent polls, and it's in the article, recent polls that the population is not only is growing increasingly tired of the upbeat propaganda, but on the other hand, totally at 80% or more support the war, support the effort. So yeah, they're probably getting tired. Anybody in war, 1940s, most people were tired of the war, tired of the restrictions, but they were damn sure backing our troops in the East or in the Europe and in the Pacific. So they don't necessarily say they're disagreeing with the effort. In fact, they're saying it's just the opposite. Okay. He keeps pressing, though, the points that he thinks should happen. One, he said, you have to accept that this is a stalemate. Okay, fine. But then he said we should negotiate. He argues that at best we could maybe get Crimea, but that we should give up Donbass. And he also states that the vast majority of Ukraine says no giving up of property. No, we're not going to stop until we get the original guidelines or original borders of in 1914 or 2014 back. So that's an important element too. But he thinks we should negotiate. We should obviously give up some land, the Donbass. We should negotiate hard for Crimea, but not necessarily get it now. Okay. Well, as far as I'm concerned, Russia would take that deal all day long, after saying they won't, of course. But, okay. But he's also said the government should change the focus on territory to regional security. So forget about not getting back all the country. We should talk about regional security. And he says that they need a new post-war, Cold War, pan-European collective security deal. I don't know about you, but I don't think that's worth the paper it's written on. Okay? You're talking about 20-some countries agreeing on what the deal is. You're saying that Spain is going to agree and back up what Poland and the Balkans need? I don't think so. And if I were the Balkans and Poland, would I agree that, Spain will go right down the tube with this? They'll send us all their troops. It hasn't worked that way. I mean, right now we know that one of the countries have refused to renew it. And, is arguing that they're going to refuse to vote that way. And you have to realize, I think, and hopefully come to the same conclusion I have, that as we have committed to support Ukraine, we now say, well, kind of depends. Okay? First of all, it depends. It's only an agreement that one of our presidents made. And one of our president candidates right now said, no, and in 3 days I can have this resolved. Well, there's only one way to resolve it in 3 days, and it's to capitulate to Putin's requirements. Okay? There is no other way. So he's proposing some things, and I think he's worthy of listening to. Certainly about that he's concerned that Ukraine could be a state similar to Russia, but not exactly. Zelensky is not a Putin. He's not a prior KGB colonel, and he hasn't probably personally killed anybody, and he hasn't probably had his people killed as Putin. So different. They're both presidents, but there's a different personality there. Anybody who's listened to Zelensky knows that he's an okay guy. He's just a stand-up guy. Whether he's being advised and capitulate or agreeing finally, or just saying, these people are doing it by themselves, he is ultimately responsible for whatever he says and whatever is done. There's no question in my mind on that. But I don't compare Zelensky to Putin. And I think even the hint of that is an insult to the Ukraine. It's an insult to Zelensky. All right, so I think this article is really a well-deserved to be read by a lot of people. And it goes into a lot of things that we haven't got time to. And they talk about Prime Minister Boris Johnson really played a key role. And they kind of hint that he was the one who kind of organized the resistance or organized the international community. I think he may have been that. But to suggest that he kind of controlled or was a major factor the decisions of Ukraine, you got to be kidding. I mean, the president of the Ukraine, if you remember that great statement when he was asked at the initial, he said, they were said the U.S. offered him a plane out of it, which they've done and have been accepted on their deal by many people. But he said, no, I don't need a plane. I need bullets. I don't know if you remember that. I stood up and saluted first time I heard that. I said, this guy's got, and I'll accept the word that starts with B that we all know. And we just got one more thing to add tonight about this whole article. What was the most amazing part, I'm going to say, maybe even shocking, was that in the very beginning it said where he went, okay, and where he is now hiding. He's hiding in the United States in a location not disclosed. And I said, what? This guy is being, I'm going to say, assisted? Because I can't believe he'd be in the United States without obviously coming through the border. And I can't believe that he's hiding, that they wouldn't know about it, because he's a significant player in the Ukraine government. He has been, was. So that really shocked the heck out of me. So I just ended there. I think it is worthy because there's no reason why he's here. I can't think of a reason why and it had to be at the highest level. It had to be probably CIA, whatever. It had to be to get him in here and get him secure. So I'll leave that with your thoughts and what you think of it, and we'll let it go. Hello, folks. I'm back because last night I came up with an aha moment. And technically we finished the recording of the podcast, this segment of the podcast, but it was such a good aha moment that I thought I'd come back briefly. I was pretty adamant and pretty regular in talking about that. I have no idea why this fellow, this administrator, is in the United States and to some extent is in an unknown address. It didn't make any sense to me until that aha moment. And I'm not saying this is it. It is just a possibility, but it's an interesting possibility. So I'm saying, who would do that? Who would keep this guy, let him in and keep him hidden? And then I said, oh my God, perhaps the State Department, perhaps the president, perhaps the CIA. I don't know who to accuse or who would do this. But there is a reason why he should be here. It's an escape. It's an alternative to Zelensky. Zelensky is kind of a hard-nosed, if you will, and I like that. About what he will negotiate and what he won't negotiate with Russia over the land of Ukraine. This guy was more willing to give up some of Ukraine, not all of it, maybe the Donbass, or clearly the Donbass and maybe Crimea. He was sort of overly flexible on negotiating. I'm thinking, well, it's almost like 3 days of the Condor with Robert Bradford. I'm thinking, holy cow, is this an alternative that somebody is keeping on the side just in case? They just can't get Zelensky to negotiate, to bend. Because if he's eliminated, and there's been, 20-some attempts on his life already, what if they succeed? Who is going to be the next president of Ukraine? And I'm thinking, well, gee, they say he's known. They say he's actually popular. And, this really sounds like, a weird out theory, but I'm going to throw it out to you. I'm not convinced that this is it, but I'm convinced it's a possibility. And so we introduced this guy. He magically shows up after Zelensky's dead and has enough to be the next president of Ukraine. A guy, next president, who's already negotiated a contract pre-signing that admittedly gave up areas in Ukraine, including Crimea and Donbass. And he liked it. He even celebrated it. Now, when he celebrated, I said, what? Can you imagine the the people who negotiated the Korean War with North Korea, you can imagine they celebrating the coming together with champagne and get together and say, wow, great, it looks like, yeah, maybe we could take a trip together. No, I don't think so. And can you imagine the people who negotiated the Saigon and there? Do you think that night they went out and drank together? Or you can think of any other major conflict. World War II, the surrender of Japan. Do you think everybody went to I can't even imagine why anybody would want to do that. So that's what I'm saying, and I'll make it as fast as I said. There may be a hidden agenda, and it may be just in the reserve in case they need it. But I'm going to end it there because I won't go on. We've got a time too, and so do you. So thank you for listening, and if you have a thought, comment on the blog. I would sure be interested in what you have to think. So next week, we're going to return, when we're talking about the main topic, we're going to return to our original, I'm going to say program, where we're developing the thought of how this mythical ticket could operate once they are elected. And we'll bring it back to that. And as far as digressions, we've had 2 in the last 2 podcasts where we talk about topics not related to the main topic. I like that. But we've also changed, sort of on the fly, the content of those digressions, even after announcing what they were going to be. So I'm going to say, let's not announce a topic for the digressions. Although we have attempted to follow on some of the earlier ones, like AI. So we're leaving that because, frankly, we've already experienced that there are things that have happened, what we feel are current and important to announce, even overriding the topic we thought to talk about. So I hope you appreciate that. And with that, we'll say goodnight.
You've been listening to United and Independent. What separates this show from others is that Richard has the background and experience to back it up. You can find detailed information on his background at the website united-and-independent.com. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we hope you've gotten something from it. Make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, follow us on social media. Thanks for helping to make a difference. See you next time on United and Independent.